Well, hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma. I'm Nick, and today I am really excited to be talking with Kisma about the mindset to get your life set.
Welcome to the Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can sparkle just a little bit brighter each and every day. If what you hear speaks to your soul, go ahead and give us a rating and a review in iTunes. You can also find us on SoundCloud and Stitcher. And hey, if there's somebody in your life that you think would enjoy this podcast, go ahead and share it with them.
Well, hello, Kisma.
Hello.
Welcome to your show.
I'm excited to be on my show. It's kind of like a semi-guest. This is so exciting.
It is exciting. How was your week?
Oh, my week was awesome. Very, very busy. What is today? Today's Friday. We're recording on Friday. Yeah, I was at a conference last week with some really amazing people and then got back. And you know how it always is after a conference, it's like massive implementation. A lot of my precious clients and students who I love dearly. And it's just been super cool. Did a webinar yesterday on intuition and mindset. And yeah, awesome week. What about you?
Same. Very, very busy. Very exciting. Did an extended video interview.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that seemed pretty cool. I hired like the real deal videographer.
It was very cool. Yeah. I can't wait to release it. We're going to have some really cool new stuff for the Energy Mastery peeps. So that's really cool. Yeah. But you are probably one of the most active people that I know as far as productivity and just staying in action and getting stuff done and producing a lot of content for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really excited to talk with you today about mindset because I don't know too many people who would be able to keep up that pace without totally going insane, crying.
Well, I've cried my tears every now and then.
It
doesn't happen too often.
It's okay. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, what goes into that and where this comes from for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question because it is true. I deliver a ton of content. I create a ton of content. I'm on the phone a lot. I'm on Skype a lot. It comes back to my musician days. I remember starting to play the flute in the 6th grade, and it was probably a year in. I was like, I want to be a professional flutist. I want to be a musician. I want to play in an orchestra, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. It was like this solid decision in the mind of a 13-year-old.
That is pretty profound for a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Now, as you started to get into your career in performance, you just made the decision at that age. Did you feel a lot of pressure to perform at a younger age, or did that come later when the stakes were higher?
Yeah, it's funny. Something happened at one of my first band concerts. I'll never forget this. Like it was Mr. Violi was conducting. He always took credit for my career. And I was like, dude, no. But anyways, he was conducting and I was playing first flute. And I played a wrong note.
Like how bad of a wrong note?
It was a bad
like a trumpet player bad
wrong
note?
I played a G instead of a G sharp. It was not good. It was like in Sound of Music or some solo. And at that moment, like nobody made a fuss. It was the freaking 6th grade band people. But at that moment, I was like, I will never play a wrong note in public again. And I pretty much didn't play very many wrong notes in public.
It's a good thing you didn't play the trumpet or a brass instrument for that matter, because we have a tendency to cack. Who
knows? I could have been the most awesome, just because it was such a I was so resolved. Like I will never freaking. This is so horrifying that I will never play a wrong note again. I still remember sitting there. It was definitely an analogical experience. So what it did was at a young age, like the age of 13, just solidify this mindset of I was just resolved I was going to be good and no one was going to mess with me and no one was going to make fun of me and I was going to practice my flute.
You're just going to be the best at it and that's the end of it.
That's the end of it.
Okay. So you carry this with you through your middle school and high school careers.
Well, let me just share. So then there was this summer that so people if you have kids in band, you got to keep, there's a lot of emotional stuff that comes up because it's competitive. It's like that. What is that movie with the drummer?
Whiplash.
Whiplash.
I never saw that.
Oh my God.
I can't believe I haven't seen that
That
yet.
was still my generation, right? When I got into college conservatory, yes, it was still like that. But anyways, I remember going to, maybe after my 7th grade year, I went to a band camp. You know, my mom drove me like to Indiana or something.
Is this this one time at band camp story?
This is that, well, I don't know which one you know, but I auditioned, like I was the youngest. I was the 7th grader and there were 8th and 9th graders there, right? And we took an audition and I won the first chair because I'd made the decision that I was going to be the best, right? Well, the older ones didn't like it. They did not like the 7th grader showing up from Steubenville, Ohio, taking the first chair. So I kind of, you know, it's like I was in my world though. I was like loving it and playing it. And I know they didn't like me, but I really didn't care because I decided at that concert with Mr. Violi that I was never going to play wrong note again.
Wow. But so you started to pressurize yourself right from the start. Did that get, did you just kind of manage it at a certain, in a certain way through that?
At that age, it was, I get what you're asking, but I think it was also a way of escaping. You know, I was a little bit chubby kid. I didn't fit in. I wasn't athletic. I didn't do well in gym class. I didn't do well on the swim team. And I was just like, this is my world. So it was really like an escape and I did love it. But I just figured if there was anything I could do well, it was playing the flute. So I was going to spend as much time practicing as I could.
I get it. And so that was almost like a defense mechanism,
in a way. And then once I got into middle school, I was just like kind of ahead of the crowd there. So I would say it was a lot of pressure then because I was really dedicated. So I just had a knack for it. And I'd usually get ones at solo and ensemble. I'd always get the first chair. It just kind of came, but I also really worked at it too. I really, really practiced.
Right. Yeah, of course. Of course. And then you took it from there and went to college. Where'd you go to college?
I spent my first 2 years at Boston Conservatory. And this is when I would say the pressure started because in a small town in Ohio, you can be the best. But when you start to go and audition, for Oberlin and where else did Peabody I got into, Boston Conservatory I got into. There were other rejections. I was like, wait a minute, I'm getting rejected. This is horrifying.
You were like the number one in Steubenville,
I was the number one.
And I'm learning all about the Steubenville culture from Robin Yoakum's books.
Yeah, I actually went to Wintersville High School, but anyways, lived in Steubenville. But so then all of a sudden I'm getting rejected. And this is when I believe I started to like suffer, right? I was like, what's going on? I'm not good anymore. And that's when I started to identify who I was as a person with how I played the flute.
So it wasn't just as a flute player, it was as the best flute player.
As the best flute player. I just wasn't the best flute player anymore. I was good. But what happened again, that resolved, like it really carried on. I went to Boston Conservatory and every single day I woke up by 6:30, went and ate breakfast and was in the practice room at 7:30 a.m. practicing 2 hours before harmony, theory, ear training, music history ever started.
Wow. What were some of the dynamics in the conservatory setting, for you as far as like interpersonal? Like, were you still the flute diva? Did the older kids still not like you, or was it a different kind of thing going on?
I was there. No, Boston was okay. I mean, I had catching up to do. And then I had some really great friends. Like there was the second year I roomed with Kathy Block, who's an amazing jazz musician, and her daughter's like up and coming now, Sarah Block. You want to check her out. And Susan and Karen, like we had an apartment. We were really good friends. So I was really supported. It was a beautiful community. And then I transferred to New School of Music in Philadelphia. And I did that because I wanted to study with David Kramer, who was amazing. And even there, like, I think I was just really blessed. It was small. It wasn't like a Juilliard Curtis scene. I hung around with a couple of the Curtis flute players and they were cool, but they had their thing going, like some competitiveness. I was like, I don't want that. So I think I just, divine intervention, I was placed in a place where I could handle it. Although I did obsess, about getting into places and going to summer music festivals. And when I didn't get in, I was really, really hard on myself.
Well, that's part of like the musician culture at that level is this that you almost kind of like connect and commiserate over the pressure that you put on yourselves.
Exactly.
That pressure for perfection, because that's just so everybody understands, really especially in the classical musical world, it like that perfectionism is like, that's the standard.
That's
like,
normal.
That's not like a dysfunctional thing necessarily. People they torment themselves with that.
Just pack your instrument up.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not discouraging you young people out there, keep playing, but it really is like perfection is the standard.
Yeah.
And then it's whatever sparkle and personality, musicianship, and everything you put on top of that. It's quite intense.
True artistry.
Yes.
That is what is required. So throughout that, it sounds like you had a good group and a supportive group around you. But it's like a support group to continue to deal with the pressure that you're feeling and experiencing.
Or if you're like, oh my God, I'm not doing well in ear training, or I can't do that solfege. We used to do the French solfege, and I don't have much of a voice. And it was
fixed dough or movable dough?
We did fixed dough.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. It was just like crazy town. So the things that happened that were really cool is I landed some really great music festivals. I went to Spoleto Festival for 3 summers in Charleston in Italy. And those were just like amazing summers in my life. I went to, I can't remember now, it's so long ago. But it just gave me confidence, and when I was able to sit in an orchestra and be recognized by a conductor, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I got it. But then you get out of, conservatory. I went to grad school at Temple University, and then it's audition time.
Well, that's what I was going to wonder. Yeah. When did you start to hit the audition circuit?
Well, I really started taking auditions probably after maybe my senior year of undergrad and graduating. I mean, I just went because I had smart teachers like, you better figure out how to take an audition. And for those of you that have never been in this culture, musicians fly at their own expense, pay their own hotel, show up, stand behind a screen and play a list of orchestral excerpts to a committee that they can't even see. And who knows? Like, you never know what's going on at the committee. Is someone having diarrhea? Is someone constipated? Is it a tuba player or flute? Like, you just don't know. And if you don't make that cut, like we always say, oh, did you make the cut? Did you make the cut? If you don't get into the semifinals, you go home. You're done. It's like 10 minutes and $500 later, and you go home. Mm-hmm. And then if you do make the semifinals, you got to like shake it off, go back and practice and come back and play. And then you come back and play. I mean, I know, I can remember a couple of auditions. It was just like, okay, you're on again. And it's just back and forth playing for 30 minutes or whatever. It's really incredible. And then you can do all that and still not get the job.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, this is important to understand just as far as when Kisma talks about mindset, like what the context that this is coming from. Now, as one of the personnel managers for Detroit Symphony, I sat on stage for literally thousands of auditions, like thousands of auditions over the 10 years that I was there. And it was fascinating to watch this. And you'd see the pressure that people are under, and what she's describing is basically is right on. There's a screen in the vast majority of auditions, so they don't see who you are, and you're out there playing what is typically either the most difficult or the most prominent repertoire for your instrument, back to back to back to back to back. If you make it that far, because you may just get through the first 2, and they're like, "Thank you, and that's
what
it."
They say. It's like, "Thank you," and you're like, "Really,
really." Dang.
Can I just play one more excerpt?
Yeah.
No.
And then if you do happen to make it through, then you're back. And I remember time and time again, they want to hear you play this one more thing.
Yeah.
So they're getting their instrument back out, getting warm back up. This is after a long day of high pressure playing, to come back out and do one more thing and one more thing. And I have seen, just for the record, extremely successful people with big jobs go through that process and get to that stage and just crack.
Wow.
And sound literally like a high school student at that age. Or it was fascinating. It's just like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
And that was so humbling for me watching it, because it just realized how difficult that process is to actually win one of those jobs.
Totally.
So you went through that. How many auditions did you take before you won your first job?
Oh, I want to say maybe 12, 14. I know. And then
that's really not bad. Like that's really good actually.
And then the first job I got, it was Hudson Valley Philharmonic, because I moved up to New York after I graduated from Temple, did the New York freelance thing. I actually landed a gig there, Jupiter Symphony. That's where I met my dear friend Andy Simon, who we then worked together in Hong Kong.
Oh my gosh, you guys go way back.
Way back. And then up to Hudson Valley, where I met Phil Dykman, who we just lost last week. Bless his soul. Like, it's a big thing. But, I guess what we're getting at here is I figured out mindset early. Like, all right. And it was really like out of fear of being ridiculed. But I was like, okay, I got this. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to play really well and not mess up and not be flustered. So that's kind of like began my obsession of mindset. And it got better as I performed. And then I was in Hong Kong for years. And I think the point where it really elevated to an excellent place was when I let go of what people thought. Because this, Nick, is like so many musicians, performers, actors, artists, so many people in general. Their biggest worry is what's somebody going to think, that judgment factor. And so that like really squishes one's creative ability.
Well, in the audition process, that's the whole point.
Yeah, it is the whole point. But at some point you have to transcend that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. So what I want to go back just for a second though, as you're starting to win a couple of jobs, like what is there something in particular that you were doing or at that phase in order to get past that first hurdle of actually winning a job?
It was relentless.
Just being
it's like
relentless.
I was absolutely relentless. I remember when I was living in New York City, Washington Heights, 174th, and that'll come to me. But I had this really amazing family next to me from Israel. And they were so kind because I would go and temp at Citibank during the day. And then I'd come back and I'd practice at night for whatever gig I had going on with Hudson Valley or the other gigs I did or whatever audition. And Mr. Frankel once said to me, he's like, I really admire your dedication. When I look back, because I was just like some 20-something-year-old snot, I was like, man, I was so lucky that he didn't say, just shut up. Like you are practicing way too much, but you have to understand Washington Heights. There's so many musicians that live up there, but it was like, I put the time in. I was so prepared.
And that was like your methodology was just relentless preparation to feel like you're prepared for everything.
Prepared for everything, relentless.
No matter what. And truthfully, in that situation, you're really never going to be prepared for anything or for everything that can come your way.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and I've seen it, the hall can be super cold.
It can be super cold. Your instrument can have something going on, but it was that. So in that respect, like I nailed it. I had mindset that, this is why I could go to Citibank and work in some department with a bunch of construction management guys and not be flustered and just be like, okay, it's why I could fly to Italy and play opera or, get on a stage and do chamber music or do like I could really knock it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I can certainly believe that. What was the first really big job that you won? Was that Hong Kong?
Yeah. Hong Kong. I mean, in terms of like, putting myself on the map as a flutist, I think it was that Hudson Valley job, even though it was part-time because there were like 100 flutists that took it and a lot from the New York area. And I was sort of the new girl in town. But then I went down to Savannah, which was great. And then moved, with my ex-husband at the time to Lincoln, had Zoe, then then Minnesota. I was just freelancing. And then then I got Hong Kong from Savannah for a year. Right. Yeah. I won Hong Kong. I went there for a year, came back, and then we did the Midwest thing. And then I went back to Hong Kong for 8 years. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting about this, the scene, the classical music scene, is that, you've got a smaller orchestra like Savannah, which isn't, it's not that big. It's not a huge orchestra, right?
Very small.
But then you've got like Hong Kong Philharmonic or some of the larger philharmonics here in the States, And truthfully speaking, the level of musicianship that's required to get into the Savannah Symphony, and then take you into a bigger job, like it's really like splitting hairs in so many ways.
It is. I mean, the greatest musicians were getting these small jobs because there were just so many, and there still are so many great musicians. This is so true.
And so few jobs.
And so few jobs. That's why it was so competitive.
And what I think is so interesting about that too is that like there are just the circumstantial things. The person who's having the best day that day, right, is the one who happens to get through to the next level.
Or just preference, taste, and sound. I mean, sometimes you just know there are some that there's a few players out there that would go in and just nail it, and you could pretty much bet like they were at the top and they were going to nail the audition.
Right.
There's just a handful, I think, in the world that really do that.
I just think it's so fascinating, though, to see that fine line.
Yeah.
Like that's so,
totally.
It really is such a fine line. So it's really extraordinary that you even made it that far, but then to take it into the next level of Hong Kong Philharmonic.
Yeah, that was fun.
Now, when you transitioned into full-time playing, how did that shift with managing your own mindset and your own energy around that to make it more sustainable over the long term? In Detroit Symphony, I saw that toll of sustaining a career throughout the schedule. Like, what sorts of things did you have to do in order to keep your sense of longevity?
I didn't have the tools. It was just force fit. So what happens is you get agitated. I can only speak for myself. I got agitated. I got very flute diva-y, took things personally, just everything was about playing the flute. So it became very self-centered, I would say.
Yeah, and to understand, I think another thing, just to glimpse for our audience behind the scene, is that, these are musicians, they're playing in compelled to perform at an extremely high level, right? That standard of perfection. And to do that with a wide variety of repertoire. So everything from light pops and fun music to, really deep and abstract repertoire that's extremely challenging and very dense, and you could see all of that within the span of a few weeks, depending on the orchestra that you're playing with. So changing gears, that was one of the things in the Detroit Symphony that I noticed was most taxing for the musicians when they'd have these really different programs that they'd have to change gears for, week to week or within the same week.
We would do that in Hong Kong. We'd go to schools and play quintet concerts, to like 3 in a day. And then we'd have a canto pops concert that weekend. And then we'd be playing Mahler the next week. And then I'd be doing a concerto in Beijing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was
it
really,
adds up.
It adds up. So things can break, elsewhere. I think that was part of it. I remember like when I started to hear like, okay, it's really time to do something different. It's time to leave Hong Kong. It was my 9th year in the orchestra, 8th year in a row. And it was like my dad started to get sick and I would just hear this voice like, go back, and musicians can become very unhappy. I can't speak for anybody else, but I think I was unhappy. I think I did feel that pressure and just like, is this all there is? Is this all there is? And I started to be really interested in yoga and philosophy. And I was traveling all over Asia because I lived there. So it was like a quest to Thailand, to the Philippines, to Malaysia, to Singapore, just everywhere I could go. Vietnam, I was there all the time. So something was calling me to something else. And that's just my personal journey. That's whatever, for whatever reason, I was to pivot and I was to leave the classical music world and then embark on what we're doing now.
So more into the realm of spirituality.
Yeah,
and
really. And it
metaphysics.
started, I was so lucky when I opened my yoga studio in Grosse Pointe. I was so lucky to play in the Detroit Symphony as a sub because that was just like one heck of a flute section and an orchestra. And it was just amazing. I loved it. I was like that, it just to have the studio and be able to play there. And then soon enough, like I just couldn't keep up the practicing.
Well, I, for one, was always really happy when you came for different reasons, but that's beside the point. What I understand is that as you started to bring that into a full-time career, the toll that it was taking or what you were finding was that really this relentless mindset of I will just over prepare for absolutely everything. It's like at a certain point, it just becomes impossible?
I don't think it becomes impossible, but I think there's a choice. Either you let go a bit and just simply become unattached to the results and do your best, or something's going to break.
Yeah. And so did you find things starting to break for you?
Yeah, for sure.
What kinds of things broke?
The happiness factor. And it was really, I think, why when I started yoga in Hong Kong, I was like, this is amazing, because I was getting back in my body and I had some sort of place to release. And so, yeah, I never became sick. I never used drugs. I didn't become an alcoholic. I just think there was a tension and this calling to always, all right, you got a concert tonight. And I can only speak for myself, right? I don't know how other musicians really personally dealt with it, but get that nap in, watch what you eat, the whole thing. And after a while, for me, it got a little tiring.
Yeah. Ironically, it's not something that a lot of musicians talk about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've found anyway. Mm-hmm. So then you start to get into spirituality, you start to get into, kind of the more metaphysical type of things. Mm-hmm. I know you've been, that's been a calling for your whole life and really on some level as well.
Totally.
Whether it got overshadowed by the flute or not.
I think it did, but that's okay. It was supposed to.
Yeah. Well, sooner or later you come back to it. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that's relevant to mindset, to focus, to sustainability and productivity.
It comes full circle with what I do with my students and clients, is realizing that mindset is just the tip of the iceberg. I was teaching this, like I said, in a webinar last night. I'm like, you can stuff that positivity factor in your brain and you can stuff it again and again. But if the underlying energetics and your real belief system isn't solved and resolved, it's not sustainable, and it's going to feel super frustrating. It's going to feel like somebody is just pressing on your brain. Like, I had an image that was really funny. It's just like this guy squeezing his face in his hands. So, and you see this in athletes too, right? They're performing at a peak level, but you can see how many athletes might be messing up their personal life or having issues with the law, like hopefully not a lot, but we see it, right? So,
well, certainly financial.
Yeah. So somewhere there's a missing component where the spirituality, and if you don't want to call it spirituality, the energetics, the alignment, the true alignment of who a person is, who a human is not there. And that creates a further tension that is just unnecessary.
So just that real connection with themselves and being able to come back to that.
Yeah.
What about as far as intuition is concerned? Yeah. I mean, I noticed as a musician, you have to remain connected to your body to a degree, right? You have to be fully in that experience.
You have to be grounded.
And when you get into your head, is really when the mistakes start to happen. That's I can only speak for myself, but that's the pattern that I noticed. As soon as I get into my head and disconnected from my body, man, like cack central.
Yeah,
like,
am I going to make a mistake? Oh my gosh. And then it's like dwelling on the mistakes rather than dwelling on the excellence, right? Just like anything else, what you're thinking about, you're going to bring in. So intuition is really, to me, that spiritual faculty that allows this sense of flow and a download from your higher self. And when you're performing and when you're playing, you want the download from your higher self. When you're speaking, when you're teaching, when you're in front of a crowd, when you're in front of your family, when you're running your business, you want the connection. You want that hookup to source, universe, God, your higher self, whatever you call it, because that's where the real information comes. That's where you become more certain and more confident, because your mind, the mental chatter, isn't going off worrying what everybody else is thinking. It's just like aligned with your highest and best.
So just always bringing it back to right here, right now. This is it.
Yeah. Present to the present moment. I mean, we hear that a lot. Be present on your yoga mat. But no, people aren't present. We talked about that. We went to the Krishna Das concert the other night. It was a mess.
Yeah.
People, I couldn't believe it. Like, Krishna Das is an amazing kirtan artist. And this is like, this is beautiful spiritual music, whatever your faith is, whatever your belief. People were up and down and walking around and getting up and going. I'm like, no one's, well, there were people there, but I was like getting a little flustered. It just amazed me, not present.
Yeah. He is amazing. Yeah. By the way, just like laid back and doing his thing. But bringing it back here, what's interesting with the orchestral music, I think, but any music in general, or you could apply it to sports, but there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Like there are so many little nuances to it, and how all of the players, especially when you take it into an orchestra where you've got, sometimes as many as 100 or more musicians all at once.
Right.
Like how many things are happening there and how important an intuitive sensibility becomes.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you thought about and developed through your career, or was it just natural to the process of performing?
For me, it became natural to the process of performing. I was like really keen into the other members of the orchestra, what they needed, what I needed to sound like to support them. But it developed after I let go of the worry of what people thought, when I got my mind out of it. So it's the same thing as now, like whatever I teach in terms of alignment, mindset, spirituality, whether you're running a business or in your home, it's like being tapped in is the most powerful place. It truly is, because you can let go of that lack mindset, limitation. And it's just like, I got this. Or if I don't got it, if something goes off course, I can handle it. And that's a very powerful place to be.
So just to be a little bit more clear on that, can you talk a little more about how mindset and intuition work together and hand in hand?
Yeah, totally. So as I mentioned, mindset, most people teach it, share, like think positive, gotta believe, focus on winning, focus on performance, focus on this. And yes, like your thoughts really are super important. However, if your thoughts are just at the surface level and they don't have the hookup to your higher self, at some point, what I see happening with so many people that come to me is that it's not sustainable. It doesn't feel true. So it's almost like you're feeding these positive thoughts and gearing up this mindset, but inside there's that negative self-talk or there's that doubt. I see this, there was a mindset, quote unquote, expert, and it was the cutest thing ever because he posted something on Facebook. He's like, hey, everyone, look at check out what I made. And it was a long copy sales page for his latest mindset course for entrepreneurs to make money, right? Well, what happened is that people started chiming in with feedback. And as soon as they chimed in with feedback, he couldn't handle it.
Oh.
And I was like, well, this is really interesting. You're the mindset guru and people are giving you feedback because you put your stuff all over Facebook and now you can't handle it. That's not excellent mindset. That means he's taking everything personally. Whereas if you have a really cool mindset, you can be like, oh yeah, that works. Oh no, that doesn't. Like the objectivity, right? So intuition in play with your mindset means you're tapped into a higher way of being, doing, and having. And that allows the objectivity to come in. And objectivity is really key for any mindset. I mean, wouldn't you say so?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's the piece that provides the real resiliency.
Exactly.
Because let's face it, I mean, on the internet, you're going to encounter all kind and manner of criticism and things like that, and just weird and very inappropriate people and things that they say. So it's a little bit of a medicine ball there where, you can see some pretty extreme circumstances. And if you don't know how to be objective with that, what's sad about that? This is the thing that I find that's pretty sad about that is that you miss all the treasures.
You miss all the treasures. You miss the wisdom, like the golden gems to make it better, the transformation. And once we take things personally, it's like, it becomes so freaking heavy. And all we have to do is like when someone's giving feedback is be like, does that apply or does it not apply? And if it applies, thank you very much. And if it doesn't apply, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, if we look at intuition as a higher aspect, so, I use this analogy, mindset is the tip of the iceberg. Well, intuition is above the iceberg, right? It's the higher aspect. And then you have the mindset. But then below the mindset is really your beliefs. And your beliefs are going to be driven by the alignment or lack of alignment of your energetic bodies.
Yeah, it really does come down to that fundamental level.
It does. Yeah. If the fundamental level, if the base of the iceberg is melting, you're in trouble. But if it's like really strong and resilient and you're cleared of those negative blockages and negative self-talk, then your belief system and your mindset begin to add up. They're in alignment, and then they guided by the intuition, you're gold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting analogy too, because what happens then is when that happens and the iceberg erupts from the bottom, it actually capsizes.
Yeah, it turns over.
And then what do they call? There's a name for it,
I know,
but it's basically it looks like black ice, right? Because it's like even more dangerous.
Yeah, and then some ship hits it, and it's big.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Well,
don't want that.
Now I know after you've been working with a lot of high-powered people, successful people, active and productive people.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the common challenges that you see with high achievers.
Sure. Well, perfection, they are smart and they want to be perfect, and I don't blame them. A lot of pressure on themselves. So, I work with a lot of people in corporate, and they're in a pressurized environment, and then they put more on themselves. So that's the challenge. But the beauty is because they're all so open to the energetic resolutions, when they do that, they're like, oh, things are starting to make sense. And they can see their own company from a different perspective. They can see their role in the company from a different perspective. And then all of a sudden, that person that maybe has been, they think, picking on them or annoying them, when they clear their part of it, that person is not so annoying. That person is not so threatening.
So it shifts their dynamics not only within themselves and their own peace of mind, but also within the dynamics of the relationships in the organization.
Whenever we clear and work on ourselves, whenever we take care of our stuff, it absolutely shifts the energetics with other people. And then whatever is theirs is theirs. It's not your business, right? We're here to be in our own body, mind, intellect, emotional system to take care of our side of the tracks. And they do the same. But the more you're cleansing and clearing and getting aligned, it really does affect everything.
Yeah, that's I think an exciting part, is that you can impact others simply by working on yourself.
Totally. And impact the planet. I mean, you raise your frequency 1%, you're going to raise the frequency of the planet 1%. You're going to raise the frequency of your family. You affect your children and your spouse. They might not know what's going on, but trust me, the more tapped in, with that, we just call it the peaceful mind and the dynamic action. I mean, that's just the way to live.
Yeah. When you start working with these people, I know that you've encountered some pretty interesting coping mechanisms for the pressure that they feel on themselves or the pressure that they feel in their lives. What are some of the favorite coping mechanisms that you see?
Well, I don't run into a ton of addiction and abuse, but it's out there. We know that people cope with that. They're going to numb themselves down. Oftentimes what happens is people numb themselves down with sugar. Or ramp their own physical bodies up with caffeine. But usually what I see is the coping mechanism is to blame themselves, to take on a lot of guilt, and then to just put a lot of pressure on themselves.
Oh, so it's more like, if I can just beat myself up a little bit more, just kick my butt just a little bit more, then I'll get back in gear and I'll get back on the top of my game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not really a sustainable model.
No, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly tried that one.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Not
you sleep,
great
you
effect.
wonder why you're breaking out, the skin has issues, start complaining at your family, or you control your kids. I mean, that's one thing too. You don't want to take it out on your family or try to control the family because you feel out of control at work. So the more aligned you are energetically, so many other things just fall into place. It's like, let's flow.
Yeah. And that's really I think it's a word that's used a lot these days, alignment. But it's really appropriate, I think, for just being fully centered.
I know it's overused, but let's think about what it is.
Well,
what is it to be aligned? Yeah. It means that your emotions and your thoughts are guided by your intellect. You have control. Think about it, everyone, to be in control of your thoughts. That's a powerful thing. And that is not happening to too many people on the planet. Maybe for a few minutes, but then they get distracted, or then they take something personally, or then there's anger or rage or jealousy or greed or whatever. To be in control of your thoughts means you know where you're going, you know what you want to manifest, and you're really like just creating this divine success track. That's alignment, and that's pretty pristine.
Mm-hmm. How do you create that?
Well,
without, however many years of intense performance experience and trial and error.
I know. I mean, it's like we have different methodologies. We work with people to align their energy, and I'm happy to discuss that. Go to kismawake.com and look for the Work with Kisma. There's an application there to fill out, and happy to talk and explore that. And really, it starts with a choice that you want your life to be different. And then it's like, once you choose, you've got to examine, when you examine your thoughts and when you examine your results, because some people say to me, well, how do I know? I said, look at your results. Are you getting what you want to get? And then, be really meticulous with your thoughts, be deliberate with what you bring into your mind and what you send out to your mind. If you want to get somewhere, then create a plan and stick to it, and let it be your plan, and avoid being entangled with everybody else. I talk to so many people who are trying to figure out why so-and-so's doing something, and they're trying to understand this person, or they're worried. Mind your own business and be in your divine success track.
That's just mind your own business like that.
Build your life, do your thing, guide your thoughts. Train of truth comes by right then. Really, it really does start with the thoughts, with the beliefs, and then your actions.
Yeah. Hey, it seems like there's always just so much to work on with yourself.
Yeah.
That whenever you're getting distracted with that, it just slows down the process.
Well, and before we close, let's share. We heard something last night from one of our teachers who said, we're closing out one of our favorite books by Swami Parthasarathi, and he said, many people invest in a home. And they plan on being in that house for 25, 30 years, as long as they can, pay off the mortgage, do the upkeep, redo the kitchens, there is a long-term investment. We should be looking at our own person, our own mind, body, intellect, emotions is having the same investment.
In it for the long haul.
In it for the long haul.
That's a really interesting perspective. I mean, I think a lot of times either we're looking for a quick fix because it's just painful and frustrating to be, where you're at sometimes, or, afraid that you finally got there and it's going to change.
Exactly.
Right. And so you kind of back and forth between those, but to really look at it as a long-term investment.
Long-term investment. This is your journey, everyone. This is your quest. This is your time. And how many, I've said this a million times, but our time on this planet is a whisper, so make it a beautiful whisper.
Poetic.
The
artist in Kisma coming out.
Thanks for this, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Really neat to get behind the scenes with you a little bit. Is there somewhere in particular that you want to send people?
No, just check out my new website, kismawake.com. There's we've got our Science of Spirituality, Science of Meditation courses. There's a Work with Kisma. If you're really interested in the deep work, fill that out. But look, share the podcast, come back, give us a rate and review. We so love doing this. And as you know, we feel it's a really, really important message.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your life today.
All right. Thanks for having me. My own podcast. See y'all later.
Peace.